Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Chavito to the Ocho, and today's day is March 8th, 2024. In this video, I want to be able to look back on all the memories we shared growing up in the early 2000s when we used to have high quality games such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Wii Sports, Super Mario Galaxy, Smash Brawl, Sonic Unleashed, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, GTA, and Kingdom Hearts 2. But what I'm going to be talking about today is one of the best video game consoles ever to be released from this millennium, and that is the PlayStation 2. So, are you ready for a trip down to memory lane? Then sit back and relax, because I'm going to be talking mostly about the PS2, discussing the history behind the GOAT of gaming consoles, the library of games released for the PS2, and listing some features we had for the PS2, along with some features that we wished that we had for the PS2, along with some exclusives. And by the way, today is the PS2's 24th birthday, and next year will be its 21st birthday. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not 21st, 25th birthday. So happy birthday to the PS2, and we all hope you have a 25th birthday in the next year. And so, without any further ado, let's begin. For those who were born in Generation Alpha and Beta, you're probably wondering what the heck even is a PS2? Well, back in the 90s, when we still had the original PlayStation, or the PS1 for short, there were rumors from the press in 1997 that a new PlayStation was in development and would have backwards compatibility with the original PlayStation, a built-in DVD player, and internet connectivity. Sony denied those facts at the time until March 2nd of 1999, when the PS2 was first released around the world. And then on September of 1999, Sony unveiled the PS2 in its all glory during the Tokyo Game Show. This momentous event marked the console's grand debut, showcasing its impressive capabilities and power. Attendees were treated to fully playable demos of upcoming PS2s, including Gran Turismo 2, Tekken Tag Tournament, and Dead or Alive. Then, on March 4th of 2000, in Japan, the PS2 became such a huge marketing success and then was released later outside Japan to North America on October 26th, and in Europe of November 24th towards the holidays. Every GameStop and toy store, including Toys R Us, and even eBay, were all sold out because of its high popularity and large demands of shipments. The financial success of the PS2 at the end of 2000 caused Sega to both financially and competitively have problems, and Sega then later announced that the discontinuation of the Dreamcast in March of 2001. Just like 18 months after its successful Western launch. Despite the fact that the Dreamcast was still receiving support through 2001 with Sonic Adventure 2, the PlayStation 2 remained the only 6th generation console for over 6 months before it faced competition from new rivals, the Nintendo GameCube and the original Xbox from Microsoft. Many analysts predicted that a close three-way matchup against the three consoles. In terms of hardware specifications, the Xbox had more powerful hardware, while the GameCube was the least expensive console with a smaller optical disc drive. The PS2 had its weakest specs of the three, and it was a head start due to its installed base, plus a strong developer commitment, as well as built-in DVD player, which the Xbox originally didn't have, but you could use a playback adapter in order to actually use the DVD functions, and the GameCube lacked support entirely due to software piracy. We'll talk about more about the specs and other features later, but for now let's talk about the games. I'm not going to list all of them, but I do want to share some of them growing up. Starting with GTA San Andreas. GTA San Andreas was first released on October 26, 2004, and as a kid growing up, your parents wouldn't let you buy the game if you were under 17 or at least 18 years old. But your grandma, on the other hand, wanted to spoil you and give GTA San Andreas for a little Christmas present or your birthday present. Thanks, Grandma! And of course, there was the time where players had discovered cheat codes by just simply playing the game and experimenting with the cheats themselves. And at the time, there was no way to Google the cheats because there was no such thing as the internet back then. I mean, to be honest, yes, there was the internet, but there was no official link or website that you could find the cheat codes easily. I hate to be the Grandpa Simpson of gaming, but you kids these days and your Garguras and your Apple Visions and your TikToks and your Baby Sharks and your Cocoa Melons and your stupid skibbity dibbity turlet. You see, back in my day, we used to have a PlayStation 2. That's right, a PlayStation motherfucking 2. We used to have those little black binders with the little zipper that you could carry around with, and you could put PC-ROMs and CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays, which was the style at the time, and it still is to this day. And then we used to play games like Dragon Ball Z, Budokai Tenkaichi 3, Crash Bandicoot, Full Metal Alchemist, Metal Gear Solid 2, and oh I know, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, Bleach Blade Blasters, another One Piece Grand Battle, Naruto Shippuden Ninja Storm 3 and 4, // Infection, Guilty Gear, Capcom vs. SNK, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, The Simpsons Hit and Run, Family Guy, the video game, and of course, Road Rage, Tekken Tag Tournament, and my favorite, GTA San Andreas. It was known as one of the greatest GTAs of all time, and we didn't have to use stupid Google to search for all the cheat codes. You wanna know why? Because there was no such thing as Google back then. So you know what we had to do? We had to find the cheat codes ourselves. We learned how to do things the hard way. Sure, there was no either way except those alley cats you see in one of those anti-piracy commercials from the early 2000s. You know how you watch Garfield in 2004 on DVD, or you watch one of the Paramount DVDs, and then there goes those anti-piracy commercials like, you won't steal a car, you won't steal a woman's purse, you won't steal a cell phone, piracy is stealing? That was the shit back in the day. In fact, millions of players like me had to suffer through severe trauma and long-term memory loss. Hell, even had some crippling depression trying to remember them and then eventually having not to remember the cheat codes at all. Hell, I even once tried to kiss a girl for those cheat codes, and then I even had $50 to have sex with a girl just so I could get my hands on those stupid cheat codes. Was the sex worth it? Hell yeah! But at what cost? So the moral of the story here is, kids, if you want those cheat codes, you have to find them yourselves. And don't forget the notebook. Make sure to pass them on so that way newer gamers of the future won't have to end up sleeping with a hooker for those cheat codes. Please, please don't make the same mistake that I made 50 years ago. And help me find my dentures, I lost them. Have you seen them? Okay, well, thanks for the story, Gramps. So yeah, if we wanted to find the cheat codes, like he said, we have to discover them, memorize them, and preserve them for ages to come. Now the next game I want to talk about is Kingdom Hearts. As you know, or might not know, I've done a Let's Play series of the first Kingdom Hearts game on my gaming channel, Jason Plays, with the Japanese PS2 release of the first game, called Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. Except that I had to use the English patch in order to play it. I have a playlist in the description below. Yes, I heard of the Kingdom Hearts series, and I have a long time ago, but I haven't got a chance to play it until last year in the summer 2023. And when I played it for the first time, I started to begin to fall in love in the series, not just the Disney characters and the nostalgic worlds of the Disney Renaissance era, but the celebration of Eastern and Western media combined. I mean, to be honest, I bet all of us back then expected the game to bomb, but it was absolutely glorious and written well, and it had, heart, emphasis on heart, passion, and of course, a fresh new way of playing RPGs. And of course, well, deep down in my gut, when Sora died of it, it caused me emotional damage. But thank God he came back to life. And I really have to say, the game looked very stunning back for the 2000s. So if you have kids at home and if they ask for a PS5 for Christmas, I recommend you give them the Kingdom Hearts collection. It is absolutely to die for. And speaking of which, I'm planning on completing the entire Kingdom Hearts games in order of 1.5, 2.5 Remix, 2.8, 3 plus Remind, Melon Memory, the upcoming game KH Missing Link, and probably when the time KH4 comes out, I'll be able to do like a Let's Play of it. Maybe before then when they decide to release like something similar to Remind, like a Final Mix update. Maybe I'll get a chance to play it sometime. And I know it's gonna take like forever to catch up with the series, and I'll never get a head start if I do this, but I have to. So by the time when I get out of school, I'm gonna do a Let's Play of 358 Days Over 2 and Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix when summer vacation comes. So we'll have plenty of time to do it. And honestly, I don't care for 100% completion. I just want to get the story over with. But if I have to, then I have to. Okay, maybe I will get 100% for the achievements, but not just because I want to get all the achievements for retro achievements. I just want to get 100% on Jiminy's Journal and get the secret ending. That's it. So yeah, like I said before, I'm going to do a Let's Play series of 358 Days and KH2 Final Mix when summer comes. And of course, I'm going to emulate them instead of having to buy the PC port. And for the last game, as part of my top 3 PS2 games of all time, I want to talk about possibly one of the greatest racing games ever made for the PS2. And I know what you guys are thinking. Is it Gran Turismo? Is it Crash Nitro Racing? Well, it was actually developed by EA Games before their controversial loot box and of course, the pay $5 to unlock this segment every single time. Back when they used to make good games and high quality entertainment games instead of having, players to buy everything to unlock everything. The absolute best era for EA Games. And was also released for the Xbox, the GameCube, and on PC. Windows XP PC. I'm talking about one of the best Need for Speed games ever made. And possibly the sequel was better than the first. Of course, that game is Need for Speed Underground. My cousin used to own a PS2, and I have to say, Need for Speed Underground is kind of like Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, but as a video game. You can customize your car, you can wreck your opponent's car, and you can use a lot of nitro in order to boost all your way to first place. And of course, I like how you add like the blur effect whenever you use the nitro. It kind of feels like they're going supersonic at like 600 miles per hour. Like if you're actually the driver yourself and you go like zoom all the way across the one point A to point B. You can also play online, and of course there's the 2-player multiplayer. I wasn't too sure if you actually did needed to use the multi-tap, but back when I played with my cousin, it was a 2-player. But yes, if you had the network adapter installed, then you can be able to play it online. And honestly, I think Underground should be remastered into a newer generation console with ray tracing, newer and older cars, the exact same cars and just like in the originals. And of course, an explicit lyrics filter so that way you can listen to Get Low the way it's meant to be heard. Also, the Black Eyed Peas song, Let's Get It Started in Here, but replace it with the R word. It's alright guys, I have autism myself, and I have the R pass by default. Anyway, it's been a while since I played it, and I would love to replay it again sometime in the future. Maybe I'll get to try it out sometime. Plus Underground 2 and Burnout. And that's all the top 3 games that I remembered for the PS2. If you have your favorite PS2 games, then let me know down in the comment section below what was your top 3 or top 5 or top 10 PS2 games that you grew up in the past. Let me know down in the comment section below. Now this topic might be technical for some viewers, but if you're looking into learning about the hardware specs for the PS2, then you're in luck. If you want to skip, then you can go ahead and use the timestamp in the description to skip. But anyways, here are the PS2 hardware specs. For the CPU, Sony's main Emotion Engine CPU, which is a custom RISC processor, and it operates at 294.912 MHz, and for later consoles, a total of 299 MHz. For the system memory, we had 32 megabits of direct RAM bus. I'm not exactly sure what direct RAM bus means, I just looked it up on Wikipedia. But for the graphics, we have the graphics synthesizer, got the 147.456 MHz, and it heavily relies on its integration with its 2 vector processing units, or VPUs, known as VPU 0 and VPU 1, and a floating point unit, FPU, to render its 3D graphics. For its video RAM, it contains 4 megabits of EDRAM, and the sound format is PCM. It supports stereo at 48 kHz, and you can connect it to your surround sound system with an optical cable up to 5.1 surround sound in AC3 format for both Dolby Digital 5.1 and DTS 5.1. And as for the software, any PlayStation 2 game you own will either be on a CD or on DVD-ROM. But how do I tell which one is a CD or DVD-ROM? Well, the answer might look complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. If you look at the back of a disc, you may notice the back is a different color. So, if the game disc is blue, then that means it's a CD-ROM, and it can only hold up to 900 megabytes. which is a close to 1 gig. And however, if the game disc has a silver back with a little rainbow tilt, then that means it's a DVD-ROM, and it can only hold about 4.7 gigs of data, which is actually pretty common for most DVDs. But however, if your PS2 games is a dual layer disc and it holds more than 4.7 gigs up to 8.5 gigs, then it's a double layer disc. Some will go higher up to 9.4 gigs, and some will need a double-sided double layer disc up to 17.08 gigs of data, which is probably the most highest that it can go to. It won't go higher than that. So if you have too much data on it, then you'll probably need to have like a more layered DVD in order to handle that much storage. But I highly doubt that any PS2 game that will have the ability to go higher than that. So either 4.7 gigs of data or 8.5 gigs of data is the best way to play any PS2 game. Preferably God of War or GTA. And if you want to read more about the CD-ROM and the DVD-ROM's max size and the different types of DVDs, then I will provide links in the description as well so you can take a look at it. For the memory cards, its standard issue is an 8 megabit memory card. You can upgrade up to a 16 megabit, a 32 megabit, 128 megabit, and a 256 megabit. However, the 128 and 256 megabyte memory cards, I'm sorry, I meant to say SD, but it's not SD, memory cards, my bad. The 128 and 256 memory cards have a lot of trouble when it comes to reading data, and some may have issues when it comes to formatting your memory cards, potentially losing your data. So if you do want to store a lot of data on the PS2, then use a 32 megabyte memory card. I don't know why this happens, but maybe it's because it's made by a third-party company, and of course the Magic Gate encryption technology is a little picky from time to time. And of course some games like Kingdom Hearts can be very fickle when it comes to memory cards. I've mentioned before that you can use the network adapter along with this 40 gigabyte hard drive on the PS2 and store even more data and temporary data. You cannot, for copyright reasons, install actual game data and files on it. But thanks to Homebrew, you can do that. You just need to reformat your drive, that's all. The expansion bay is only available on the 30,000 models and the 50,000 models. A lot of you don't know this, but back when the PS2 was released early in Japan, there's a PC card slot on the back of the console, meaning the PC card is like one of those network cards that you can use for older laptops from the 1980s. So there's a proprietary PC card slot for the network adapter only the PS2 in Japan had at the time, and the only one to use it was the Broadband Navigator external hard drive disk. So you could just connect it with this proprietary PC card. You're also going to plug in another power supply to make sure it's running, because this was before the network adapter was a thing. And if you wanted it to use the hard drive, you're also going to need the Japanese hard drive utility and the network startup disk in order to install the network connections and the hard drive format drivers. It's a region loss thing. And of course, by the time when the Japanese versions of the 30,000 and 50,000 series rolled out, you can still use the same network adapter. You just need to format your drive with the Japanese, utility and startup disk in order for it to work. And don't worry, Americans, if you have an American version of the PS2, fat models, 30,000 and 50,000, with an American network adapter and an American version of the utility disk and the startup disk, you could do that. This whole thing is region locked for a reason. And finally, for connectivity, there's only two USB 1.1 ports, which is the slowest USB ports at the time, and only for 3000 series models, there was a iLink port. If you don't know what an iLink port was, it's like a little micro USB like blue port that you see before on a 30,000 console. That's actually called iLink, or a FireWire. Its main purpose in the early days of the PS2 was to link consoles together for local network multiplayer, or a LAN party. So everyone needed their own set of PS2s and iLink cables, and the games specifically programmed for it. Not too many games supported, which is why Sony then dropped the idea out for the 50,000 series for the PS2s. If you want to check which games supported the iLink ports, check the link in the description below. Of course, I forgot one thing, the controllers. For the PS2 controllers, it's a DualShock 2 controller. You can use it for analog or digital, which is a little press of a button. And of course, you can also use the original PlayStation memory card and the original PlayStation DualShock controllers if you wanted to. Now just bear in mind, when you play a PS1 game, you have to use a PS1 memory card. Whatever, for some reason, the PS2 memory cards are not backwards compatible. Okay, now that I cover about the hardware specs, now I want to talk about the PS2 features. Plus, I'll also be listing some features that were exclusive to Japan and never released outside of the country. And as mentioned before, you can pop up any PS1 game along with your PS1 memory card for full-on backwards compatibility. You could connect to the internet with LAN connections in order to play online with a network adapter. You could also use a 400 GB IDE SATA hard drive along with the network pack bundle or the Final Fantasy XI online kit to install more game data for more space. Sure, the boot up process may be slower because it needs to read the hard drive and all of its content, but it also meant faster loading times and larger saves for extra content. Do you remember when the Kinect for the Xbox 360 came out on November 4th, 2010? Well, what if I told you that the PS2 have already done something like this before? You'd probably be like, nah, stop lying, man. Well, am I? Well, get ready for the PS2's iToy. You see, before the Wii came out, the PS2 had an earlier concept of the Kinect, and that was the iToy. You can play dancing games like Dance Dance Revolution, Sega Superstars, Karaoke Revolution Party, and of course with the PS2 microphone that you needed to connect in with the USB. Or you can take a selfie in games like The Sims 2, Tony's Hawk Underground 2, and of course in some games like the Major League Baseball games. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it's for, but you could do that. If you want to see the list of games supported with the iToy, the link is in the description below. You could also play DVDs if you wanted to watch a movie or a full-time marathon of SpongeBob, Simpsons, or Family Guy. But this was a popular choice in terms of building a home theater back then, because you could literally save a few bucks instead of buying a separate DVD player when the PS2 already has a built-in DVD player. You could also set parental controls and guide the DVD menu with the controller too, instead of having to get an additional remote for that. I mean, yes, you could also get the DVD remote made for the PS2 if you wanted to, but I don't know. It's totally up to you if you want to do that or not. And of course, by today's standards, the PS5 Disc Edition can let you play any CD, DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K Blu-ray. And of course, if you have a surround sound system, just connect it to a Toslink optical audio cable for a full 5.1 surround sound with this high def fidelity and THX speakers in your living room, cracking out the sound to 11. Now, unfortunately, there is one feature that sadly did not make its way outside of Japan because Sony Computer Entertainment America at the time said they promised they would bring it to North America and soon to Europe and the rest of the world, but they never end up doing so. And that was the PS2's Broadband Navigator. I've actually mentioned that before when I was listing the specs, but yes, we're going to be talking about a long lost feature that Japan had for a short period of time and it never made to the United States. And that is the PS2 Broadband Navigator, or referred to as the BB Navigator or the PSBBN. As I mentioned before, the PlayStation 2 Broadband Navigator, or the PSBBN, is a Japanese software for Japanese PS2s, and of course it was available for the PS2 models in Japan with the PC card slot, and of course each unit came with the IDE hard drive affixated for them with an additional AC adapter, which required an additional outlet. You just need to find a space for it. And of course, you could also use the Broadband Navigator software for the Japanese versions of the PS2's 30,000 and 50,000 models with a network adapter. Ordinarily, only consoles that were sold in Japan were able to run the software, and it had no access to outside region whatsoever. The BBN offered many features, including access to online sites with a browser, downloadable demos, or you could just buy games and download them directly onto the PS2, downloadable pictures and movie files, and it contains information pages on past, current, or future releases and services, with a Linux-based web browser. A tool converted the audio CD into audio files on a hard drive, and an organized system for audio files on a hard drive. And of course, you can also transfer memory card data onto the HDD, make files of it, just like how you did before with the PS2's default browser when you use an American version of the hard drive. Except that with the PSBBN, it had more features on it. Think of this as an earlier concept for the PSP, PS3, and its PS Store app, but in the early 2000s. However, all the game channels, including the news channels, became inaccessible when the BBN services were shut down in 2016. And it also had a strict region lock, making it unusable on non-Japanese PS2 consoles. This was later revived by the PS2's hacking community and for, homebrewing purposes. Imagine if we had something like this a long time ago. This would have been revolutionary, and we would be living years ahead of time. And of course, this would also break millions of records for best-selling video game console of all time. It will have more accolades than what the Xbox or the GameCube would already have, making it definitive Japanese console of the year. Seriously, imagine if we had something like this. We beat the PSP and the PS3 to it. I bet you're all wondering, Jason, how do you know so much about this? Well, that was because I was stumbling around PS2 restoration videos, looking at videos of people restoring PS2s back to its former glory, until I saw a video made by Gray Skies Ringfall in Peace called PS2 SCPH 15000 PSBBN Dashboard External HDD Showcase. I was like, what? What even is this? So I clicked on it and then checked out, its menu, and then I was like, oh my god, this must be like an earlier concept of the PS3 Store app. And you know how I felt like? I was like Peter Griffin in that episode where he ate so much hamburgers and then he had a stroke, and then of course he went to that research lab, and he went in and did the surgery or whatever. It only lasted him 5 minutes, and then he went back outside and asked how long he was in there for, and the guy was like, 5 minutes. I mean, to me, well, that felt like, and when I saw that video, I clicked on it and I watched it, and then later I came out like, how long did Japan have this for? And then I looked up on the internet and they had it since 2001. And then I was like, why are we not funding this? Honestly, that was my reaction when I first saw the video. But seriously, why was Sony not funding this? You know how much money they would have made if they were released outside of Japan? They would have made tons of money, tenfold. But they didn't want to do it in fear of Nintendo and Microsoft stealing secrets from Sony's internal revenue. And the programmers and designers. And of course, we have our last topic today, which is another piece of Japanese media that never got released into the United States. Mother 3!
On Reggie, give us Mother 3! How about this instead?
And of course, with that being said, there is the PlayStation X, or PSX. Yes, I know, the PSX is a code name for the original PS1, but it's also meant to be an all-in-one hybrid of a PS2 and DVR. So let's take a quick look at it. So, the PSX DVR, or PlayStation X, is a digital video recorder, or DVR, with an integrated PS2 console, and was released around December 13th of 2003, with a 160 gig model and a 250 gig model, with the sticker prices around 79,800 yen and 99,800 yen, which equals in US dollars $532.32 and $665.73. That's super duper expensive as fuck. Who would really pay for that much? Except for snobby rich kids and high-end buyers. I'm looking at you, Sneech from Doraemon. While the PSP was in development, you could use the Memory Stick Pro in order to transfer photos, videos, and music. And there was also a video editor, an image editor, and an audio editor. And of course, the PSP wasn't able to be connected with the PSX DVR until a soft firmware update when the PSP first became available to the public. And of course, the PSX DVR was its very first Sony device to ever use the XMB, the GUI. You know, the traditional Sony PS3, PSP, XMB that we all know we love. It was an early prototype at first, and then it became the new standard for most PlayStation consoles. However, due to the high cost of the system, there was a huge lack of consumer interest, and then it was discontinued later in 2005, after a short 2-year release. And why did the PSX fail? Well, honestly, because the hard drive and its internal fan caused to overheat from time to time, losing potential data at first. And of course, the PSX was incompatible with all first-party PS1 and PS2 controllers' memory cards, except for the Pocket Station. And the main unit has 2 controller ports located on the backside, connected with the video cables, which honestly was the dumbest place to put them. Well, you should have put them on the front side of the console, because the memory card slots are only available on the front side, hidden under a panel cover. And while the unit itself was sold without the game controller, the PSX branded DualShock controller was sold separately, except it had a longer cord, because using a regular DualShock controller won't be long enough in order to reach to it. Because of the different placement of the controller ports and memory card slots, it was also incompatible with the multi-tap, and no PSX specific multi-tap was ever made to get around with the issue. Games that required to use 2 or more USB ports were also incompatible with the PSX. And probably by the time when the PSP was in development, yes, there was a software update that you could use the PSP and connect it with the USB, and you can also use the Memory Stick Pro in order to transfer files on it. So yeah, I think I've mentioned that before already. Prove me if I'm wrong, but yeah, you could do that with a software update. Also, not to mention, just like the regular PS2, the laser got dirty very easily, and there was almost a rare chance in it to get replaced. You might have to end up getting a newer one eventually at the end. So that's why it was a failure. Another reason why it failed in Japan was because due to marketing in general. Who was this made for? I mean, they already made the PS2 already. They should have made a PS2 Pro, and with a better CPU, a better graphics card, and of course, more FPS, and more developer-friendly, CPU, because the Emotion Engine was so difficult to program around. Even developers complained about how complicated and how difficult, the CPU really was in terms of its architecture. But perhaps this product was meant to be only sold to the highest of bidders. By the end of 2004, they lowered the prices down to 44,000 yen and 59,000 yen. Do the math. And of course, before it went back up into April of 2005. It didn't last forever until they decided to cancel shipments outside of Japan, because they never decided to take note of what was wrong with the original models in the first place. And of course, because of customer feedback, they had to get some PSX models replaced because it kept on overheating. So that's why it never released outside of Japan, making it a Japanese exclusive console that we never really officially got localized into the US to this very day. That and Mother 3. But all of that changed when consumers were able to sell the PSX on the internet. Nowadays, when we can use the PSX console as a rare collectible, so we can mod them, tear them down, and restore it back to its former glory. And of course, a Japanese exclusive console like the PSX deserves to be remembered by millions, just like the Japanese Sega Saturn, and of course the Japanese Sega CD, and of course, who cannot forget the Japanese Sega Master System. So that way, newer gamers of the future can be able to explore the mysterious behind-the-scenes magic behind this Eastern electric antique. I'm not going to get into too much about homebrewing, but yes, since the PS2 was no longer being sold, homebrewing meant we can be able to use PS2s in a way that we never had, that Japan did for a short period of time, but we can do even further than that. However, back in the day, it was very difficult and required a lot of knowledge of computer science and applicated skills of soldering in order to crack some codes. Yeah, I mentioned the hacking community before, yes, and it's still active, just like the Wii hacking. But so far, we don't have any updates yet. There's a lot that we can do to the PS2 that Sony can't, like using the memory cards with free McBoot, free DVD boot, open tuna for slim models. We can even use a USB drive to load homebrew apps, and if you have a hard drive, you can install games directly on there. All you need is a clean rip of any PS2 game using HD Loader, and just play it on Open PS2 Loader, or OPL for short. Yes, you can use HD Loader to play them after installing them, but for some odd reason, the PS2 hacking community says it's highly recommended to play them on OPL, or just use PCSX2. And of course, whatever, for some reason the USB does not load the cutscenes very well because it's slow transfer speeds. So either just store your data on the memory card or use a hard drive. Also back then, it took additional software programs like WinHip in order to format your hard drive in order to use OPL. But now with the newer update, you don't have to do too much hassle for it if you want your hard drive to be larger than 2 terabytes. And of course, you can also use a micro SD card in order to install games, but I don't think none of the PS2 games are tested in yet. I'm not sure if they have tested Kingdom Hearts games on it yet. So, yeah, you might want to do some extensive research on that. But that's all I know in terms of homebrewing. You can load homebrew apps, you can switch to different regions, and you can even load fully installed PS2 games on a hard drive. And of course, I'm not gonna do any PS2 homebrewing until I get a PS2 myself, whether it's an American or Japanese one. If I end up getting a Japanese one, I might use a voltage converter, but until then, don't ask me for homebrew stuff until I get a PS2 in my own hands. Now, there are not too many flaws for the PS2, but there are some things that really grinds my gears that I actually would like to list. So if you have any other flaws that you would like to share, be sure to post them in the comments below. Starting with the disk drive laser. If you're one of those people in the world that owned a PS2 Slim and suffered through temporary disk reading errors with the infamous red screen of death, then maybe the lasers are very dirty and need to be cleaned and with a cotton swab and some Espera alcohol, or probably because the ribbon cables are damaged during shipping, or probably because manufacturers need to put in so much space so that they don't think carefully about the ribbon cables, or somebody just tampered with the ribbon cables, or probably the Espera alcohol got into the ribbon cables and fricked up the whole system. That they need to be replaced by Sony's repair services. I've seen a lot of PS2 restorations, and this is a very crucial thing to know in terms of keeping a PS2 Slim's health clean and dust free, also damage free. So yeah, you might want to be very careful when it comes into the disk drive. Any bad chance of damaging the ribbon cables can end your disk drive for good. Along with the disk drive is the disk tray. I've got nothing else to comment except for the mechanism of the disk tray. Over time, as the console develops dust and dirt, the disk tray can get really stuck, or sometimes it will open very slowly. To keep it nice and clean, you have to tear down the PS2 and take out its disk drive and clean its internal parts. To know how to keep the disk tray nice and clean, I recommend you check out a guide by iFixit. The link is in the description below, but I must warn you, if you don't know what you're doing, then do not do this. And for this next part, there's also a guide on how to replace the old fan with a newer one. Again, if you don't know what you're doing, then this could potentially harm your console. So be sure to have the knowledge in order to do this, or else you're gonna get nowhere, get stuck with this. Now for the fan is very loud for both the slim and the fat models. There's actually a hard mod also made by Macho Nacho Productions, where you can replace the default fan with a much more quieter one without tampering with the circuit board. All you have to do is tear down the PS2 and disconnect the old fan and replace it with a new one. If you want to know how to do that, check out the tariff guides that I placed in the description below. It should cover different tutorials for both PS2 fat and slim models. And the last two flaws I want to talk about is wireless internet connections and the PS2 Slim's expansion bay removal. So first, let's talk about the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi was released back in 1997, and of course, if the PS2 would have used Wi-Fi, it would have been one of the world's first Japanese gaming consoles to connect to the internet wirelessly. It will even make even more money, but of course, I'm not sure if people in Japan were able to use Wi-Fi back then or did not know how to integrate with Wi-Fi, but imagine if they had the knowledge, they would have made tons of money and people would go nuts over for the PS2. Of course, this meant rising the price up, and of course people were like, well, that's too expensive. I mean, you guys are living way too much in the future. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm overthinking things, but just imagine what will happen if we did have Wi-Fi for the PS2. And of course, as for the expansion bay, if you wanted to play games like Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy Online, or even play sports games with the hard drive install option, you couldn't be able to store any temporary data for faster loading times, which kind of sucked.
Whoa, 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 that sounds like a pretty big design flaw.
Like I said before, if Sony made a PS2 Pro, it would have a beefier CPU, a much more higher graphics synthesizer, along with more RAM, at least 8 gigs of RAM, and then of course, it would have been able to load faster with a much more larger hard drive. You would have used a solid state drive for the PS2 Slim, preferably either the M.2 SSD or probably a 2.5, but with the network adapter, whichever you want to go first. And then of course, we would have been able to upgrade it to HD up to probably like 1280 720p. I mean, it would be like the earlier concept of HD, but I'm pretty sure only few people had HD TVs at the time, like the Sony Wagatron TV. Of all the things I talked about in this video, I hope you all learned so much about the PS2 and the history behind the lost PS2 media as much as I did. I know, it's a lot to handle, but if you plan on rewatching the whole video from start to end, then I'll be glad. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And so, I would like to make an honorary toast to, if not one of the greatest video game consoles of all time in the history of video games, the absolute GOAT of gaming consoles, to the PS2. Cheers! And of course, if you have kids at home, and if you have a PS2 in a box in this garage, and if you want to take it out and play it for old time's sake, be sure to let your kids play the PS2 and get to share the experiences with them. Play with them by their side. Because this is something that we 2000s kids will never get to re-experience in a long time. And of course, for all the 90s kids out there, could you stop saying that we 90s kids are superior than 2000s for 5 minutes? And honestly, I really wished I was neighbors with Stewie Griffin and this time machine, so I can, ask Stewie if I can use this time machine to go back in time and see myself enjoying a DS, and probably get my past self a PS2, an Xbox, a Wii, a GameCube, probably everything that I could possibly want, and own a huge collection of 2000s consoles, even the Japanese ones. And of course, I remembered playing Mortal Kombat with my cousin Chino from when he used to have a PS2, and of course I was a little scared when the blood came out. But someday, my lads, someday I will have a PS2 myself, so I can be able to not only restore it, keep it in a box nice and shelved, but also be able to mod it someday. And of course, for homebrew purposes, I might make tutorials on how to homebrew it. But anyway, that's gonna wrap up for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for newer uploads in the future. Happy 24th anniversary to the PS2, and the early 25th next year. And if you have any fond memories of the PS2 that you would like to share, be sure to post them in the comment section below. And with that being said, hope you all enjoy. Make sure you like the video and subscribe. And I'll see you guys again next time. Have a good evening, folks. Peace. Take care.